He's the steady, rock-solid rhythm behind the most famous, most influential, and most beloved band in history. His style is its own language, a dialect of feel and creativity understood from Liverpool to Los Angeles and everywhere in between. He is a legend, a knight, an icon. Sir Richard Starkey, Ringo Starr. For over 60 years, his drumming has been the gold standard for what it means to serve the song, to be a musician first and a drummer second. So, when a guy like that talks about drumming, it carries an almost sacred weight. It begs the question that's bounced around rock and roll for decades. Who does a drumming titan like Ringo, a man who's seen and done it all, consider to be his absolute hero? Well, the answer is probably not who you think. It isn't one of the usual suspects, the thunderous showman of the 70s. It's not a prog rock virtuoso with a drum kit the size of a small car. The answer is far more personal, more nuanced, and it reveals a deep truth about music, friendship, and the quiet mastery behind the greatest songs ever written. This is the story of that surprising choice, a decades-long friendship forged in the studio, and the man Ringo Starr calls his all-time favorite drummer. He's the beat behind the Beatles, a drummer whose style is instantly recognizable. But who does Ringo Starr, a legend in his own right, consider his absolute hero? The one drummer he says is better than anyone? The answer isn't who you think. It's a story that starts not on a stage, but in a hospital bed, with a young boy who was never supposed to survive, let alone change the world. To understand the weight of Ringo's opinion, you have to understand the man himself. Not just the smiling peace and love icon, but the improbable survivor who beat impossible odds just to pick up a pair of sticks. Born Richard Starkey in Liverpool in 1940, his childhood was a brutal fight for his life. He was a fragile boy, plagued by severe and life-threatening illnesses that stole years of his youth. At just 6 years old, his appendix ruptured. A routine operation spiraled into a nightmare of peritonitis, a severe internal infection. In 1947, that was often a death sentence. The young boy fell into a coma that lasted for days. But somehow, he pulled through, beginning a grueling recovery in a children's hospital that lasted a full year. This long stay meant he fell hopelessly behind in school, struggling to read and write. Then, at 13, lightning struck again. He was diagnosed with tuberculosis, another potentially fatal disease. This led to another 2 years spent in a sanatorium. It was a crucible of loneliness and fear, but it was also where his destiny was forged. To keep the kids occupied, a hospital. Staffer brought in small percussion instruments. They handed the frail boy a little drum, and in that sterile, quiet ward, a fire was lit. A rhythm took hold. He refused to play anything else. He only wanted the drum. That was the spark that would become Ringo Starr. When he finally emerged, he was a teenager with little education, but a singular passion. He joined the local skiffle craze and quickly found his groove. He had a feel, an innate sense of time you just can't teach. He adopted the stage name Ringo Starr, Ringo for his love of rings, Starr so his solos could be billed as Star Time, and joined a popular Liverpool band, Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. But another local band was watching, a band called the Beatles. The story of how Ringo replaced their original drummer, Pete Best, in August of 1962 is a raw and controversial part of the band's history. John, Paul, and George had seen Ringo play and were captivated. McCartney would later say that the first time Ringo sat in with them, this powerhouse was behind them, and they all just gasped. Producer George Martin had also expressed doubts about Best's studio timekeeping. The decision was made, and their manager Brian Epstein had the unenviable task of firing Best. The fan reaction was vicious. Early shows with Ringo were met with chants of, "Pete forever, Ringo never." It was a brutal welcome, but Ringo, ever the professional, just put his head down and played. And what playing it was! His genius wasn't about flashy solos. It was about something much harder, perfect musicality. He was a song drummer, and his choices were always in service of the melody and lyrics. Think of the revolutionary off-kilter beat of Ticket to Ride, a pattern so unique that drummers still study its lurching genius. Or Come Together, where the beat is the song's identity, swampy, mysterious, and impossibly cool. His work on A Day in the Life is practically orchestral, with dramatic, emotive fills that build the track's cinematic tension. His style was also a happy accident. He was a left-handed drummer playing a right-handed kit, which forced him to play fills in ways a right-handed drummer wouldn't even think of, creating his distinct sound. His peers certainly took notice. A parade of drumming royalty, from Stewart Copeland to Dave Grohl, have lined up to praise his influence, his feel, and his creativity. They point to his windshield wiper hi-hat technique, a loose motion that gave his beats a unique wash of sound. Before Ringo, many drummers were just human metronomes. Ringo made the drums a core part of the song's hook. Still, his position was shaky at first. During the recording of Love Me Do, George Martin, still unsure of the new guy, hired session drummer Andy White, relegating Ringo to tambourine. For a crushing moment, Ringo feared, "They're doing a Pete Best on me." But his talent was undeniable, and he quickly became the indispensable fourth Beatle. So when this man, a musician forged in illness, tempered by rejection, and celebrated by his peers, names his personal hero, that choice carries the weight of history. The mystery, then, is who could possibly earn that level of reverence. The clues started appearing after the Beatles' breakup, on an album that brought friends together and introduced Ringo to the man he'd one day call the greatest. It's 1973. The Beatles are a glorious memory. The four members are now navigating solo careers. John is a political firebrand, Paul is a pop hitmaker with wings, and George is a spiritual seeker. And Ringo Starr, the steady heartbeat of the Fab Four, is about to create his definitive solo album. He enlisted producer Richard Perry and called up his friends. The result was the album Ringo, the closest the world would ever get to a Beatles reunion, with John, Paul, and George all contributing. The sessions at Sunset Sound in Los Angeles were a who's who of rock royalty: Mark Bolan, Billy Preston, Harry Nilsson, and members of the band. And tucked away in those credits was another name, a name that might be unfamiliar to casual fans, but to the musicians in that room, it belonged to a master, a drummer's drummer. This was the first major collaboration between Ringo Starr and a session player whose reputation was already mythic. This was where the friendship began. This mystery man was the ultimate secret weapon. He was the guy you called when you needed more than a beat. You needed a soul. George Harrison, who worked with him extensively, had nicknamed him the stenographer of soul. It was perfect. Like a court stenographer capturing every word with unerring accuracy, this drummer captured the feel of a song, translating its emotional core into rhythm. His fingerprints were already all over the solo careers of Ringo's bandmates. He played on John Lennon's iconic albums. He was a trusted partner for George Harrison on his most ambitious music. The fact that 3 out of 4 Beatles independently chose to rely on this same drummer speaks volumes. He spoke a musical language that resonated with the sensibilities they had honed in Abbey Road. His style was the polar opposite of the stadium rock gods of the era. Where they offered thunderous power, he offered a loose, human feel. Where they played with aggressive precision, he played with a deep, almost liquid groove. His signature was a deceptively simple style that felt completely natural yet was nearly impossible to replicate. It was a style built on songcraft, not showmanship, a philosophy that sounded remarkably similar to Ringo's own. The friendship and professional respect that began on the Ringo album would endure for the next 5 decades. It became a constant thread in Ringo's career. When he launched his first all-star band in 1989, a touring supergroup where every member was a headliner, The lineup was staggering. Joe Walsh, Billy Preston, and Levon Helm and Rick Danko of the band were all on stage, and behind a second drum kit, night after night sharing the rhythm with Ringo, was his friend, the stenographer of soul. The image of the two of them drumming together became a beloved feature of those tours. It was a powerful statement. Here was Ringo Starr, the most famous drummer on the planet, sharing the spotlight with another drummer. It was an act of profound humility and a clear sign of his respect. There was no ego, only a shared joy in making music. This partnership was the biggest clue of all. For decades, Ringo showed the world who he respected most, not by saying it, but by doing it. He put his hero on stage right next to him, and after years of showing, he was finally ready to tell. For years, the question lingered. Music journalists and fans would speculate. Most rock stars named the end. In an interview, the question was put to him one more time. This time, the answer was definitive and heartfelt. Ringo Starr, the beat of the Beatles, named the man he considered his drumming hero. The name might not ring a bell like Bonham or Moon, but in the world of musicians it's spoken with quiet awe. Ringo's praise was absolute, calling Keltner his all-time hero drummer. He then said simply and directly, "No one is as good as him." That's a staggering statement. For a Beatle, a man who has played with everyone and influenced millions, to say that is the ultimate endorsement. It reframes the entire conversation about what makes a drummer great. It's not about volume, speed, or complexity. It's about something deeper. Ringo's choice wasn't a nod to a rock god. It was a profound acknowledgement of a master craftsman. The reveal of Jim Keltner's name wasn't just an answer to a trivia question. It was the final chapter in a long story of mutual admiration. So, who is Jim Keltner? And what makes him the kind of drummer a legend like Ringo Starr reveres? Just look at his body of work. For over half a century, Keltner has been the secret ingredient on countless classic records, the invisible architect of the rhythm that has defined generations. He started as a jazz drummer, but found his calling in the LA recording studios of the late 60s. He quickly became the go-to session player for the era's greatest artists. His discography is frankly absurd. He played on John Lennon's Imagine and Walls and Bridges, providing the subtle beat for Jealous Guy. He was a key drummer at George Harrison's historic concert for Bangladesh. He laid down the iconic, heartbreaking rhythm for Bob Dylan's Knockin' on Heaven's Door. Keltner himself said that session was monumental for him, recalling it was the first time I actually cried when I was playing. The list goes on. He's the drummer on Dreamweaver by Gary Wright and Steely Dan's Josie. He worked with the Rolling Stones, Eric Clapton, Neil Young, and Joni Mitchell. He was the primary drummer for the supergroup The Traveling Wilburys, under the cheeky pseudonym Buster Sideberry. He has recorded with nearly every major figure in music, with the notable exception of Paul McCartney. To be the trusted drummer for John, George, Ringo, and Bob Dylan is to have a resume that is basically untouchable. What all these artists heard in Keltner's playing was the same thing Ringo heard: a profound musical intelligence. Keltner's style is built around an almost supernatural sense of feel. Feel is everything. It's the micro-timings, the way a drummer plays slightly behind the beat to create a relaxed, heavy groove. Jim Keltner is the undisputed king of playing on the backside of the beat. It's a lazy, soulful pocket that feels incredible. It's human, imperfect, and utterly perfect all at once. This is the core of the connection between him and Ringo. Both men understood that a drum part should be a melody in itself. While Ringo did it within one band, Keltner became a chameleon, adapting his feel to elevate dozens of artists without ever losing his own signature touch. And the admiration is a two-way street. Keltner holds Ringo in equally high regard, calling him an idol. Keltner has recounted trying to explain to Ringo how important his drumming was, saying Ringo seemed totally unaware of the massive impact he'd had. Keltner would tell him, "Man, you changed everything," giving specific examples of beats that no one had ever played on a record before. He explained that in the 70s, LA's top session drummers all wanted to sound like Ringo. Producers would ask for that Ringo feel. Keltner says, "I still think of him musically every time I sit down and play drums." This mutual respect between two masters is the heart of the story. Ringo's choice of Jim Keltner as his hero is a reflection of his own deepest musical values. He chose the quiet master, the musician's musician, the stenographer of soul. In the end, the story of Ringo Starr and his favorite drummer is about more than just a name. It's a lesson in what truly matters in music. In a world that often celebrates the loudest voice and the flashiest performance, Ringo's choice of Jim Keltner is a quiet testament to a different set of values: taste, subtlety, feel, and friendship. We started with a mystery. Who could be the hero of a Beatle? We journeyed through Ringo's own improbable story, from a sickly child in a Liverpool hospital to the rhythmic heart of a global revolution. We followed the clues, tracing a friendship that has endured for over 50 years. The answer, Jim Keltner, was surprising only to those who measure greatness in volume instead of soul. For the musicians who know, the choice makes perfect sense. It's a choice that reflects Ringo's own legacy, a legacy built on the idea that a drummer is a composer, a servant to the song. In celebrating Jim Keltner, Ringo holds up a mirror to his own artistic philosophy. He celebrates the groove over the grandstanding, the pocket over the pyrotechnics. Their story is one of two masters who recognized in each other a kindred spirit. Their decades of collaboration stand as a monument to mutual respect and the simple joy of making music together. It reminds us that sometimes the most important contributions aren't the ones that demand our attention, but the ones that capture our hearts. Perhaps the greatest drummers aren't always the loudest, but the ones who listen the deepest, and in doing so, provide the very soul of the song. What do you think of Ringo's choice? And who is your all-time favorite drummer? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into rock and roll history, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. We have many more stories about the secret histories behind the music you love, and you won't want to miss them. Thanks for watching.